The music pulsed through the walls of the Beverly Hills estate, December 1967, winter air crisp and cold outside, but inside, warmth, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, a private celebration for Hollywood's martial arts elite, hosted by a producer whose name carried weight in the industry, the kind of party where reputations were built, where respect flowed as freely as the expensive liquor. Bruce Lee stood near the back terrace doors, 27 years old, 5'7", 130 pounds of coiled energy wrapped in a simple black suit. His hair swept back, eyes scanning the room with that quiet intensity people either admired or misunderstood. He wasn't here for the spectacle. He was here because his older brother, Peter, had been invited. Peter, who'd been struggling to break into American cinema, who carried the weight of being the other Lee, who smiled too much to hide the disappointment. Bruce watched Peter across the room, talking with a cinematographer, gesturing with hands that moved like he was still trying to convince someone, anyone, that he belonged here. The estate was massive. Marble floors reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Los Angeles skyline, city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds. The air smelled of expensive cologne, roasted appetizers, and that particular scent of ambition that clung to every Hollywood gathering. Waiters in white jackets moved smoothly through clusters of guests, offering hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Bruce had never been comfortable at these events. Too much pretense, too many people measuring each other, calculating worth based on box office numbers and studio connections. But Peter had asked him to come, and when your brother asks, you show up. 6 seconds, that's all it would take for everything to change. But nobody knew that yet. The crowd was a mix: stunt coordinators, actors, a few studio executives, several martial artists Bruce recognized from tournaments and training halls. Some nodded respectfully when they saw him. Others pretended not to notice, still dismissing him as that Chinese guy who does demos. Bruce was used to it. He'd spent years proving himself in a country that wanted his skills but questioned his legitimacy. Near the bar, a group of security personnel stood in matching dark suits, arms crossed, watching the crowd with professional detachment. Private security for high-profile events like this. Most of them were ex-military. Some had boxing backgrounds. A few carried themselves with that particular swagger that came from spending years believing their authority was absolute. One of them was particularly large, 6'3", easily 240 thick neck, shoulders that strained against his suit jacket, blonde crew cut, square jaw. The kind of man who'd probably played football in high school, maybe did a stint as a bouncer before moving into private security. He stood near the main entrance, scanning the room with pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog every guest by threat level. His name tag read Morrison. Bruce noticed him because Morrison kept glancing toward Peter, not friendly glances, something else, something that made the muscles in Bruce's jaw tighten. Peter was laughing now, trying to fit in, trying too hard. Bruce recognized that laugh, the one that said, "Please accept me, please see me as equal." It was the same laugh Peter had used as a kid when the neighborhood boys in Hong Kong said he wasn't tough enough to play with them. Morrison leaned toward another guard, whispered something. They both looked at Peter, smiled not kind smiles. Bruce's fingers curled slightly at his sides. The producer, a short, round man named Feldman, was making rounds, greeting guests with theatrical enthusiasm. He approached Peter, shook his hand warmly, then moved on without introducing him to the cinematographer. Peter's smile faltered for just a second before he rebuilt it, brick by brick. Bruce felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd spent his entire life watching Peter struggle with this, the quiet dismissals, the subtle exclusions. Peter was older, but Bruce had always been the one people noticed, the one with the speed, the charisma, the undeniable presence. It had created a strange dynamic between them. Love, certainly, but also guilt. Bruce's success highlighted Peter's struggles. And tonight, at this party where Peter was supposed to feel welcomed, Bruce could already sense the familiar pattern beginning. Morrison pushed off the wall, straightened his jacket. He was heading toward Peter. Bruce moved instinctively, weaving through the crowd, but Morrison reached Peter first. "Hey," Morrison's voice was loud enough to carry, cutting through the nearby conversations. Deep, authoritative, with that particular edge of someone used to being obeyed. "You're Peter Lee, right?" Peter turned, surprised, hopeful. "Yes, yeah, I'm gonna need you to step outside for a minute." Morrison gestured toward the entrance with a thick thumb. The conversations around them stuttered, quieted. People turned to watch. Peter's smile was confused, uncertain. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" "There's been a complaint." Morrison crossed his arms, biceps bulging. Someone said you've been making guests uncomfortable, aggressive solicitation, trying to sell yourself for roles. The words hit like slaps. Peter's face flushed red. What? No, I was just talking. I don't care what you think you were doing. Morrison stepped closer, using his height, his bulk, the implicit threat of physical force. This is a private event, invitation only, and right now I'm questioning whether yours was legitimate. Bruce was 10 feet away, moving faster now, but everything seemed to slow down. He could see the humiliation blooming across Peter's face, could see the way his brother's hands trembled slightly, could see the people watching, some with pity, others with that cruel fascination people have when witnessing someone else's shame. I I was invited, Peter stammered. Mr. Feldman invited me himself. I can show you. Show me outside. Morrison grabbed Peter's arm, not gently, his large hand wrapped around Peter's bicep with visible pressure. Let's go. That's when Bruce arrived. He didn't shout, didn't rush. He simply stepped between Morrison and Peter, his body language calm, controlled, almost casual. But there was something in his eyes, something that made Morrison's hand release Peter's arm involuntarily. There's been a misunderstanding, Bruce said quietly. His voice was soft, but it carried. Every conversation within 20 feet died. Morrison looked down at Bruce, and for a moment, confusion flickered across his face. This small Asian man, standing in his way, speaking with such absolute certainty. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? His brother. Bruce didn't move, didn't step back or to the side. Just stood there, 5'7" of absolute stillness, and he was invited by Mr. Feldman, who's standing right over there. Morrison glanced toward Feldman, who suddenly seemed very interested in his drink. No confirmation came. The producer looked away. Morrison's face hardened. I got a complaint. I'm doing my job now. Move, or we're gonna have a problem. There was no complaint, Bruce said simply. You decided my brother didn't belong here. You decided to humiliate him in front of these people. You decided wrong. The room was watching now, fully. The music still played, but nobody was moving. Security cameras in the corners captured everything, their little red lights blinking. Morrison's face flushed. Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my event to secure, and if I say someone needs to leave, he's not leaving? Bruce's voice remained soft, maddeningly soft. You're going to apologize to him, and then you're going to return to your position and do your actual job, which is ensuring everyone's safety, not satisfying your own prejudices. Silence. Morrison stared at Bruce like he'd been told the sky was green. Then he laughed, a short, barking sound. You're joking. I never joke about my family. Morrison's face twisted, authority challenged, ego threatened. In front of witnesses, the combination was volatile. Okay, tough guy. You have 5 seconds to get out of my face or I'm removing both of you. Forcibly, Bruce tilted his head slightly, studying Morrison the way a scientist studies an interesting specimen. How much do you weigh? Morrison blinked. What? Your weight? Approximately, I'm guessing 240, 245. 247. Morrison said it like a boast, like the number itself was a threat. Why? And you played football. Linebacker? Probably. Maybe did some boxing. You're used to size and strength winning confrontations. Morrison's jaw clenched. What's your point? My point, Bruce said gently, is that you've spent your entire life relying on physical intimidation. It's worked for you. Men back down when you step toward them. Women feel unsafe, contradicting you. You've built an identity around being the biggest, strongest man in the room. You done with the psychology lesson? Morrison's hands were curling into fists. Bruce glanced at his watch. A simple silver Rolex, a gift from a student. 6 seconds. If you try to touch my brother again or me, it will take me 6 seconds to put you on the floor. Not unconscious, not injured. Just on the floor, unable to get up, in front of everyone here. The crowd inhaled collectively. Morrison's face went from red to purple. You threatening me? His voice climbed in volume. You know I could break you in half, right? You weigh what, $130. You think your little kung fu movie tricks work in real life? I'm not threatening you, Bruce said. I'm offering you information. What you do with it determines what happens in the next 10 seconds. Peter, behind Bruce, whispered urgently. Bruce, let's just go. No, Bruce didn't turn around. We're not leaving because someone decided we don't belong. That stops tonight. Morrison looked at the other security guards. One of them, younger, nervous, said Tommy. Maybe just let it. Shut up, Morrison rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck. The crowd pulled back, creating a circle. Someone should have intervened. The producer should have stepped in, but nobody did. They just watched, excited, afraid, curious. Morrison stepped forward, reaching for Bruce's shoulder. All right, you little... What happened next, most people couldn't fully process. Bruce didn't punch, didn't block in any traditional sense. His left hand moved, barely seemed to move, intercepting Morrison's reaching arm. His fingers found a specific point just below Morrison's elbow, pressed with surgical precision. Morrison's entire arm went rigid, locked, neurons firing in confusion. 1 second. Bruce's right foot swept behind Morrison's front leg. Not a kick, just placement, geometric repositioning. Morrison's balance, which had been forward aggressive, suddenly had no foundation. 2 seconds. Bruce's right hand, open palm, not fist, struck Morrison's solar plexus. Not hard, it looked gentle, but Morrison's diaphragm spasmed, breath evacuating his lungs in a sudden whoosh. 3 seconds. Morrison tried to recover, tried to pull back, but Bruce had already rotated his body, using Morrison's own locked arm as a lever. The larger man's weight, all 247 pounds, became momentum working against him. 4 seconds. Morrison's feet left the ground. For a moment, impossibly, his entire body was parallel to the floor, suspended in physics that didn't make sense to the watching crowd. 5 seconds. He came down hard. The marble floor didn't give. Morrison's back struck it with a sound like a wet rug slapping concrete. Heavy, meaty, final. The air left his lungs again, and he lay there, eyes wide, mouth open, trying to understand what had just happened. 6 seconds. Bruce stood exactly where he'd been, breathing normally. Suit jacket not even wrinkled. He looked down at Morrison with something that wasn't quite pity, wasn't quite sympathy, more like understanding. "You're not hurt," Bruce said quietly, loudly enough for Morrison to hear but soft enough that it felt private. "Your pride is wounded, but your body is fine. You can get up any time you want." Morrison tried, his arms pushed against the marble, muscles bunching, face straining. But nothing happened. He couldn't coordinate the movement. Something in his nervous system wasn't responding correctly. Panic flickered across his face. "Breathe," Bruce instructed, his voice carrying that strange gentleness again. "Deep breath. Your body experienced a neurological shock. It will pass 30 seconds, maybe a minute." The room was silent except for Morrison's ragged breathing. Bruce looked up at the crowd. Dozens of faces stared back, some shocked, some awed, some disturbed. He found Feldman, made direct eye contact. "My brother was invited to this event by you. He's a guest. He deserves to be treated with the same respect you'd show anyone else here." Bruce's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "If that's a problem, we'll leave. But we'll leave together, walking out the front door with our dignity intact, not because a security guard with prejudice decided we didn't belong." Feldman cleared his throat, face pale. Of course, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Peter, please stay. Enjoy the party, I apologize." The words came fast, stumbling, desperate. Bruce nodded slowly. Then he looked back down at Morrison, who was starting to regain some control, fingers twitching against the marble. "When you get up," Bruce said, quiet enough that only Morrison and those nearest could hear, "you're going to apologize to my brother. Not because I'm forcing you, but because you'll realize, in about 30 seconds when your nervous system reconnects, that what you did was wrong. That you judged him based on nothing but his face and his name, that you used your position to make yourself feel powerful. By making someone else feel small." Morrison's eyes were wet. Shame, anger, fear, and then, Bruce continued, "You're going to go home tonight and think about this moment. You're going to lie in bed and replay it. You're going to feel the humiliation, the helplessness, the vulnerability, and you're going to have a choice. You can let it harden into resentment, or you can let it soften you. Let it teach you what it feels like to be on the other side of someone else's prejudice." Bruce straightened, adjusted his jacket. "I hope you choose softness." He walked back to Peter, who stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Bruce put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "You okay?" Peter nodded numbly. Behind them, Morrison finally managed to push himself to sitting position. His hands shook. He looked up at Peter, really looked, maybe for the first time, and saw a human being instead of a category. "I'm sorry." The words came out rough, broken. I'm sorry." Peter stared at him, then glanced at Bruce, then back at Morrison. "Thank you." Morrison nodded, couldn't hold eye contact, looked away. The younger security guard helped Morrison to his feet. Morrison stood there, swaying slightly, then walked toward the exit. Not running, just leaving dignity gone, but body intact. Lesson delivered. The crowd remained silent for another few seconds. Then, gradually, conversations resumed. Music seemed louder. Suddenly, people moved, drinks were refilled. The party found its rhythm again. But something had changed. The way people looked at Peter now, not with pity or dismissal, but with curiosity, respect, acknowledgement. Because Bruce had made it impossible to dismiss him, had forced everyone in that room to confront their own assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. Feldman approached, overly apologetic, introduced Peter to several people, directors, producers, casting agents, conversations that should have happened naturally, that might have happened if Morrison hadn't decided to exercise his small power. Receding, Bruce watched from the side, accepted congratulations from a few martial artists who recognized what they'd witnessed, but mostly he just stood there, drinking water, observing. An older stunt coordinator named Chen approached him. Chinese-American, 60 years old, gray hair, kind eyes. He'd been in Hollywood for 30 years, knew every shade of discrimination that existed in the industry. That was necessary, Chen said quietly, and restrained. You could have hurt him badly. Hurting him would have made me feel better, Bruce replied, equally quiet. But it wouldn't have changed him. People don't learn from pain. They learn from understanding. Chen nodded slowly. You think he'll understand? Maybe, maybe not. But I gave him the chance. Bruce watched Peter across the room, finally relaxed, finally smiling genuinely. That's more than he gave my brother. You protected him. I did what brothers do. Not all brothers. Chen sipped his drink. Most people, they see injustice. They look away. Easier, safer. You didn't look away. Bruce shrugged slightly. I couldn't. Not when it was Peter. What if it had been a stranger? The question hung there. Bruce considered it honest in his self-examination. I'd like to think I'd do the same, but I don't know. Family makes it clearer. The obligation is obvious. Obligation, Chen repeated. Interesting word. Not love, not loyalty. Obligation. Love is a feeling, loyalty is a choice, obligation is a structure. Bruce's eyes were distant. Feelings fade. Choices can be unmade, but obligation? Understanding what you owe to the people connected to your life? That, as something you can build on. Chen smiled. You think too much for a fighter. I think too much for anyone, Bruce said, and for the first time that night, he smiled too. 3 hours later, as the party wound down, Bruce and Peter walked to Bruce's car, a modest Chevy, parked on the street. The December air was cold enough to see breath in small clouds. The city hummed around them, indifferent to what had happened inside that estate. Peter was quiet for a long time. Finally, as Bruce unlocked the car, Peter said, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He could have hurt you. Bruce paused, hand on the door handle. Peter, look at me. Peter met his eyes. I've been training since I was 13. I've studied Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've fought in tournaments, street fights, challenge matches. I've spent 10,000 hours understanding how the human body moves, where it's strong, where it's vulnerable. Morrison is big, strong, aggressive, but he's predictable. He relies on attributes he was born with, not skills he's cultivated. He was never a threat to me, but you could have been wrong. Yes, Bruce opened the car door. I could have been wrong, but I wasn't. And even if I was, even if he'd somehow managed to hurt me, that would still be better than watching him humiliate you and doing nothing. They got in the car. Bruce started the engine. The heater coughed to life, blowing cold air that would eventually warm. Peter stared out the window. I hate that I needed you to do that. I know. I hate that I couldn't stand up for myself. You did stand up for yourself. You were polite, honest, dignified. That is standing up. You didn't escalate. You didn't let his aggression turn you aggressive. That takes strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It never does. Bruce pulled into traffic, merged smoothly. Real strength rarely feels powerful in the moment. It feels like restraint, like swallowing words you want to say, like maintaining composure when your body wants to react. Is that what you did? Restrained yourself? Bruce was quiet for a moment. Yes and no. I gave Morrison exactly what the situation required. Not more, not less. More would have been ego, less would have been inadequate. How do you know the difference? Practice failure, years of getting it wrong. Bruce glanced at Peter. You remember when I was 16, got into that fight with a British kid in Hong Kong? The one where you broke his nose? I broke more than his nose. I sent him to the hospital. And you know what I felt afterward? What's? Nothing? No satisfaction? No pride? Just emptiness. Because I'd proven I could hurt someone, but I hadn't proven anything meaningful. I'd won the fight and lost something else. Control, discipline. Peter considered this. But tonight you felt different. Tonight I used force to protect dignity, not to satisfy ego. Morrison will recover. His body is fine. But maybe He'll remember what it felt like to be dismissed, to be seen as less than, to have someone make decisions about his worth based on assumptions, and maybe that memory will make him different. You really think people change? Bruce smiled, sad and hopeful at once. I think people can change. Whether they do is up to them. They drove in silence for a while, city lights streaking past, radio playing soft jazz. Thank you, Peter said finally. Always pay. 6 months later, Bruce received a letter. It arrived at his Los Angeles apartment, forwarded from the production company that had hosted the party. The envelope was plain white, slightly creased. No return address. Inside a single page, handwritten, the penmanship was rough, unpracticed. Mr. Lee, you probably don't remember me. I'm the security guard from the Feldman party last December, the one you put on the floor in 6 seconds. I thought about that night a lot. At first, I was angry, embarrassed. I wanted to find you and prove I wasn't weak, that it was a fluke, that you got lucky. But then I kept thinking about what you said, about choosing softness, about understanding what it feels like to be on the other side. I realized I've been on the other side before. When I was a kid, I was small, got picked on, felt invisible. Then I got big in high school, and suddenly I had power. And I used it the same way those kids use theirs, to make other people feel how I used to feel. Your brother didn't deserve what I did. You were right. I judged him based on nothing. And I'm sorry. I'm working on being different. I quit private security. I'm coaching now at a youth center, teaching kids boxing, trying to give them discipline and confidence without making them into bullies. I don't know if that means anything to you, but I wanted you to know that what happened that night, it changed something. You could have just hurt me and walked away. Instead, you gave me something harder, a reason to look at myself. Thank you, Tommy Morrison. Bruce read the letter twice, sitting at his small kitchen table, morning light streaming through the window. He thought about Morrison. Big, aggressive, confident. He thought about him lying on that marble floor, helpless, scared. Thought about him making the choice to soften instead of harden. He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer where he kept meaningful correspondence. Then he made himself tea and stood by the window, looking out at Los Angeles waking up. 6 seconds. That's all it had taken to put Morrison on the floor. But it had taken 6 months for Morrison to truly stand back up. Not physically, that happened in a minute or two that December night, but psychologically, emotionally, the kind of standing up that requires acknowledging you were wrong, that you've caused harm, that you need to change. Bruce thought about all the moments in his life when he'd been Morrison, so sure of himself, so certain his perspective was correct, so ready to dismiss people who didn't fit his understanding of the world. He'd made mistakes, hurt people with words and judgments and assumptions. The difference was someone had given him chances to learn, teachers who saw potential despite arrogance, friends who forgave errors, family who loved him through his worst moments. Morrison hadn't had that, or maybe he had and hadn't listened. But that night, on that marble floor, something had cracked open. Bruce wondered how many other Morrisons were out there. People using power to cover pain, using size to hide smallness, using aggression to mask fear. Wondered how many of them would ever have their 6-second moment, where someone showed them another way. He finished his tea, went to his training room, a converted garage with mirrors, equipment, heavy bags, started his routine. Punch, kick, flow, discipline control, the endless practice of knowing when to move and when to be still. Minus 20 years later, 1987, a different city, a youth boxing gym in Detroit. Tommy Morrison, 53 now, grayer, softer around the middle but still solid, stood ringside, watching two teenagers spar. One of them, Marco, 16, frustrated, started hitting harder than necessary after taking a good counter. Marco, stop! Tommy's voice was firm but calm. Marco hesitated, gloves still up, breathing hard. He hit me first. So I'm defending myself. No, Tommy stepped closer to the ring. You're retaliating. There's a difference. Defense is protection, retaliation is punishment. Marco lowered his gloves, confused. I don't understand. Tommy smiled. That particular smile people get when they're about to share something that cost them dearly to learn. Let me tell you a story about the night a man half my size put me on the floor and taught me the difference between power and strength. The kids gathered around, Marco, his sparring partner, 3 others who'd been working the bags. They sat on the ring apron, swinging legs, listening. Tommy told them about the party, the prejudice, the confrontation. About Bruce Lee, though he didn't use the name, keeping some privacy, who'd moved like water, fought like philosophy, and won without destruction. He could have broken my ribs, Tommy said quietly. Could have knocked me out, damaged my face, my career, but he didn't. He put me down and then offered me something harder than pain. What do you mean? Marco asked. He made me see myself, made me feel what I'd made others feel, and then he gave me a choice. Use that feeling to become harder or use it to become better. The kids were quiet, processing. So when you're in that ring, Tommy continued, and you get hit, you got the same choice. You can hit back harder, escalate, turn sparring into a fight, or you can stay controlled, disciplined. Focused on the goal, which is learning, not winning. Marco nodded slowly. And if it's a real fight, outside the gym, Tommy smiled again, sadder this time. Then you do what's necessary, nothing more, nothing less. You protect yourself, protect others if needed, but you don't punish. You don't use your strength to prove something to yourself at someone else's expense. That's hard, Marco said. The hardest thing you'll ever do, Tommy agreed. Takes more discipline than any physical technique, more courage than stepping into any ring. But that's where real strength lives, in restraint, in control, in choosing grace when vengeance would be easier. He looked at each of them. These kids from rough neighborhoods, broken families, systems that had already decided who they were and what they'd become. You're all learning to fight here, Tommy said, but what I really want to teach you is how to be powerful without needing to prove it, how to have strength without using it as a weapon, how to win without destroying someone else. One of the younger kids, 13, skinny, new to the gym, raised his hand tentatively. Did you ever see him again? The guy who put you down? Tommy shook his head. No, I sent him a letter. He never replied, but that's okay. The lesson wasn't about him needing my gratitude. It was about me needing to change. He gave me the gift. What I did with it was my responsibility. Do you think he'd be proud of what you're doing now? Tommy considered that, I don't know, maybe he'd think I should be doing more or something different, but that's not really the question. The question is whether I'm proud, whether I can look at these kids and know I'm giving you something better than what I was giving the world 20 years ago. Marco stood up, put his gloves back on. Can we try again? The sparring, but different. Tommy smiled. Yeah, we can try again. Different. The present day, a film school classroom. A professor, late 30s, passionate about cinema history, stands in front of 70 students showing clips from Bruce Lee films. Notice, she says, pausing on a fight scene from Enter the Dragon. The economy of movement. Every action serves a purpose. No wasted energy, no showboating. It's efficiency married to artistry. A student raises his hand. But is that realistic? Could someone really fight like that? The professor smiles. There are hundreds of documented accounts of Bruce Lee's real-life confrontations. Most of them ended in seconds, not because of tricks or movie magic, but because he'd studied human biomechanics with scientific precision. He understood leverage, momentum, neurological response patterns. She clicks to a still image, Bruce Lee at that Beverly Hills party, 1967, captured by someone's camera. He's standing, calm, while in the background you can barely make out Morrison on the floor. This particular moment, the professor continues, has become almost mythical. Witnesses described it differently. Some said it was 3 seconds, some said 10, but they all agreed on the essential truth. Lee neutralized a threat twice his size without causing lasting harm. Another student speaks up. Why didn't he just avoid the confrontation? Because it wasn't about him. It was about his brother's dignity. And about something larger, the constant microaggressions and dismissals that Asian Americans faced in that era. The professor pauses, weighs her words. Still face. She continues. Lee understood that sometimes staying silent in the face of injustice makes you complicit, but he also understood that responding with disproportionate violence makes you part of the problem. So he found a third way: demonstration, teaching, transformation. The classroom is silent, engaged. The man he put on the floor that night, Morrison, went on to spend 30 years working with at-risk youth, teaching not just boxing but discipline, respect, restraint. Before he died in 2015, he gave an interview where he said that night in 1967 was the most important moment of his life. That 6 seconds on a marble floor taught him more than his entire previous existence. One student, a young woman in the back, raises her hand. But what about now? Could someone like Bruce Lee even exist in today's world? The professor considers this carefully. Lee wasn't superhuman. He was disciplined, dedicated, and willing to examine his own assumptions constantly. Those qualities don't require a specific era. They require choice. She advances the slide to a quote, white text on black background. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. Bruce Lee. Every day, the professor says, we encounter people like Morrison. People using whatever power they have, however small, to make others feel lesser. And every day, we have a choice about how we respond. We can ignore it. We can match aggression with aggression. Or we can find that third way, the one that protects dignity while leaving room for transformation. She looks around the classroom. Who in your life is Morrison? Not necessarily someone physically threatening, but someone using their position, their status, their privilege to diminish others. Uncomfortable silence, students shifting in seats, and more importantly, the professor continues, when have you been Morrison? When have you made assumptions about someone based on appearance, accent, background? When have you used your advantages, intellectual, social, economic, to make yourself feel superior? The silence deepens, becomes reflective. Bruce Lee's legacy isn't just the films or the martial arts philosophy. It's the reminder that strength without wisdom is just violence, that power without restraint is just oppression, that winning without grace is just cruelty. She clicks to the final slide, a black screen with a single question in white text. What will you do with your 6 seconds? Because that's all we get, really, the professor says softly. Moments, brief opportunities to choose who we are and how we treat others. Most of those moments don't feel significant while we're living them, but they accumulate. They build into legacies. A student near the front, young man Ernest Eyes, asks, do you think Morrison regretted that night, even after he changed? The professor nods. Probably. Growth doesn't erase guilt, but regret can be fuel. It can power decades of different choices, better actions. Morrison didn't let that night define him. He let it refine him. What's the difference? Definition is fixed. Refinement is ongoing. She smiles. Definition says this is who I am. Refinement says this is who I'm becoming. Mine it. Somewhere in Los Angeles, a young Asian American actor walks into an audition. The casting director looks up, barely concealing disappointment. Oh, we were expecting someone more mainstream. The actor feels it, that familiar sting, that casual dismissal, that assumption that his face limits his possibilities. He takes a breath, remembers stories passed down, lessons embedded in culture. Thinks about Bruce Lee, about dignity, about responding to prejudice, not with rage but with excellence. I understand, the actor says calmly, but I'm here, I'm prepared. I'm asking for the chance to show you what I can do. The casting director hesitates, then shrugs. Fine, let's see it. The actor performs, not desperately, not trying to prove anything except competence. He delivers the lines with precision, emotion, truth. When he finishes, the room is quiet. That was good, the casting director admits, surprised. Really good. Thank you. The actor doesn't gloat, doesn't make it about winning, just accepts the acknowledgement and waits. We'll be in touch. The actor leaves, doesn't know if he got the part, doesn't know if this moment will lead anywhere, but he knows he did what Bruce Lee did, refused to be dismissed, demonstrated his worth, maintained his dignity. 6 seconds or 6 minutes or 6 years, however long it takes to prove that assumptions are not destinies, that prejudice can be confronted without violence, that grace is not weakness. This is the legacy, not in museums or history books, but in daily choices made by people who've learned, from stories, from examples, from their own painful moments, that true strength is measured not by who you can destroy, but by who you can protect, teach, transform. The marble floor was 20 years ago, or 50, or yesterday. Morrison fell. Morrison rose. Morrison changed. And somewhere, every day, someone else is standing where Bruce Lee stood. Faced with the choice between destruction and teaching, between proving power and demonstrating grace. What will you do with your 6 seconds? Because the clock is already ticking.